What if luck was a curse? Have you ever looked up at the stars and asked yourself, what if everything I've ever wanted came true? And then wondered, at what cost? We've all imagined it, buying a lottery ticket on a random Wednesday, scratching it while waiting for your coffee, and suddenly, boom! You're a millionaire. All your problems, gone in a flash. No more bills. No more rent. No more living check to check. But what if that moment, the moment you felt the universe finally chose you, was the exact moment your nightmare began? This story isn't just about luck. It's about the kind of luck that clings to your soul like tar. The kind that doesn't let go, even after death. It started in mid-October, in a sleepy upstate New York town called Millfield. You probably haven't heard of it. Most people haven't. It's one of those little places off the highway, just a few gas stations, some old farms, and a diner that closes at 3. The kind of town where everybody knows everybody, and nothing ever changes. That's where Eleanor Briggs lived. She was 33. Worked night shifts at a warehouse that boxed frozen food. Single, quiet, always wore a navy hoodie no matter the season. Some people said she was a little odd, but she wasn't dangerous, just private. She lived in a one-bedroom rental that used to be the garage of an old woman's house. It had no insulation. Every winter, you could see your breath indoors. But Eleanor had a ritual. Every Friday, on her way home from the night shift, she'd stop by a dusty convenience store off Route 12 and buy 2 things, a can of cherry Coke, and a scratch-off ticket. She wasn't greedy. She didn't dream of yachts or mansions. All she wanted was to move somewhere warm. Maybe Tennessee. Somewhere she didn't need to wear that hoodie inside. That Friday in October, she bought the usual ticket, a blue and silver scratcher called Winner Fortune. She scratched it while standing at the bus stop in the dark. She was so tired her hands were shaking. But when she uncovered the last number, she blinked and held the card closer. The prize box read, $4.2 million. At first, she thought it was a prank. The cashier had to double-check it twice and then called the manager. Phones came out. Voices got loud. Within 24 hours, Eleanor was on the local news, standing stiff and uncomfortable beside a giant check. They asked her what she'd do with the money. She muttered, "Move." That was it. She didn't cry. She didn't laugh. Just nodded as the cameras flashed, like she was watching it all from the outside. But here's where it gets strange. Eleanor disappeared the next day. The check hadn't even cleared yet. She never showed up to cash it, never went back to the store, never quit her job. Her phone? Dead. Her apartment? Empty, except for the hoodie she always wore, folded neatly on her bed. The landlady swore she heard Eleanor pacing the night before, muttering in a voice that wasn't quite hers. A deep, gravelly whisper that came in waves, like radio static. She didn't think much of it until the news broke. Police did a welfare check. The back door was unlocked. There were no signs of a struggle, but the inside of her fridge was bizarre, completely stocked with raw meat. Every shelf. Chicken, beef, pork, uncooked, unseasoned, just laid out in piles. And in the freezer? All her lottery tickets from the past year. Neatly stacked, in order, frozen into a single block of ice. 2 weeks later, someone else came forward. A man named Derek Mahoney, a contractor from 3 towns over. He claimed the winning ticket was his. He said he'd stopped by the same gas station the night before Eleanor won. Bought the same scratcher. Said he lost it in the parking lot. Even had a photo of it on his phone, same serial number. At first, people thought he was just chasing clout. But then things got more disturbing. Derek died in his sleep 3 nights later. His wife found him with his eyes open, mouth full of dirt. Not just a little, packed with it. Soil caked into his teeth and throat like someone had tried to bury him from the inside. No sign of forced entry. No prints. Just mud in the hallway, tracked in from nowhere. That's when rumors started. That the ticket was cursed. That maybe it didn't belong to either of them. The Lottery Commission got involved. They launched an investigation, quietly, of course. But employees started talking. Said the winning ticket had a misprint. Said the barcode didn't match any in circulation. That it was part of a discontinued series from last year. But that's not possible, right? Those tickets are scanned, tracked, uploaded to a database. Except this one wasn't. It was a ghost. And then came the tape. The gas station had an old security camera above the register, grainy black and white footage with no sound. But it caught Eleanor's last visit. At first, everything looks normal. She's standing at the counter, waiting, her arms crossed. But behind her, you see someone standing in the corner. Only they're not standing, They're hovering. Just a few inches above the floor. Face completely in shadow. And they don't move, not an inch. They just watch her. The clerk said he never saw anyone behind her. But when the footage was slowed down, frame by frame, you can see the figure raise one hand, pointing at the scratch ticket Eleanor picks. And then the phone calls started. The store clerk got the first one. Static, clicks, and then a voice. Not a scream. Just breathing. Long, rattling breaths, like someone was gasping for air through wet leaves. Then the gas station caught fire. Middle of the night. No alarms. No witnesses. Burned to the foundation. The only thing left untouched? The security camera. Still mounted on its melted frame. Still recording. So here's the question. What if the lottery ticket you scratched open was never meant for you? What if it belonged to something else? Something waiting? What if, in the moment you felt most lucky, you were being marked? Marked not for fortune, but for collection. There's something sickening about seeing your face on a milk carton. When you're still alive. Eleanor Briggs was technically missing, but she was very much aware of what was happening. She just wasn't in Millfield anymore. And she wasn't sure how to get back. Or if she even wanted to. The first night after she scratched the ticket, Eleanor didn't sleep. Not because she was excited, but because of the buzzing. It wasn't from her phone or the TV or the fridge. It was inside her. Like a wasp trapped between her bones. A low-frequency hum that made her feel like her own body was vibrating out of sync with the world. She tried to lie down but couldn't keep still. Her fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered like something was crawling beneath them. And then the voices started. They weren't in English. Not at first. They came in clicks, in gasps, in sighs that echoed from her walls like whispers through an old vent. But gradually, they began to form words. Broken sentences. Echoes of someone else's thought. You're chosen. Balance must be paid. It is not yours. She left her apartment barefoot before dawn. Walked until her feet bled. Past her neighbor's barking dog, who whimpered and backed into the shadows when he saw her. She didn't look at the trees or the sky. She was staring at the horizon like it was pulling her. The town faded behind her. And in the morning? She woke up inside a house she didn't recognize. It was a Victorian mansion, long abandoned, boarded up decades ago. Locals said it was haunted, but nobody ever found the place when they looked for it. Not even Google Maps listed it. It just appeared where it wanted to be. And now, Eleanor was inside it. The walls were bleeding. That's not a metaphor. Thin red lines trickled from the corners, seeping down floral wallpaper like old veins. There were no windows. No mirrors. But there were doors. Too many of them. Some barely 2 feet high. Some nailed shut with what looked like fingernails wedged under the wood. She wondered. Time didn't move. Her phone read 3:13 a.m. for what felt like days. She ate what was there, strange fruits that pulsed slightly when she touched them. Water that tasted like rust and sugar. The house breathed around her. Sometimes it whispered things she didn't understand. Sometimes it screamed. But it was always watching. And in the center of it all was the collector. The collector didn't speak. But he made you remember. He had no eyes, no mouth, just a black silk hood over a shape that wasn't quite human. Sometimes tall, sometimes hunched, always just behind her. Like a shadow in the reflection you almost see. He didn't walk, he drifted. And every time Eleanor closed her eyes, she saw hands. Hundreds of hands. Some small. Some wrinkled. Some still twitching. All reaching toward her from the floor beneath the house. All clawing for something she carried but couldn't name. Eleanor came to understand something. She hadn't won the lottery. She had been offered something. Something ancient. And she took it. Without asking. Without knowing the terms. Because nothing in this world comes for free. Not love. Not happiness. And especially not a $4 million scratch ticket in a dead-end town. Meanwhile, back in Millfield, things were unraveling fast. People started seeing Eleanor. Not in person, but in reflections. Her face in the gas station freezer door. Her eyes in the rearview mirror of a passing car. Her silhouette standing behind people as they brushed their teeth. She was always just there. One woman, Angela Myers, a schoolteacher, said she saw Eleanor on her baby monitor, curled in the corner of her child's crib, whispering lullabies in reverse. Her baby wouldn't stop crying for 3 days. And then. Just stopped. He hasn't cried since. Then came the dreams. Entire blocks of residents began waking up screaming at the same time, 3:13 a.m. Their stories matched. Same house. Same red walls. Same collector. Same warning. It must be returned. It must be returned. It must be returned. A news station tried to cover it. One of those late-night local shows, Upstate Mysteries. They sent a crew to investigate Eleanor's last known location. A producer named Nate Forrester led the segment. He went in laughing, saying, "If I find a ghost, I'll give her a ticket to Vegas." They never aired the episode. What they did release, accidentally, was raw audio captured by a mic tech who had gone back for gear. It was just static. For 2 minutes. Then suddenly, "Tell her to give it back." A voice like breaking glass. Then silence. Then a scream so loud it shattered the producer's windshield, through a recording. Nate's body was found 2 towns over. Sitting in a church pew. Eyes wide open, mouth sewn shut with fishing line. Clutched in his hand? A crumpled blue and silver scratch ticket. Winter fortune. Unmarked. Unused. Back in the house, Eleanor was starting to change. She no longer felt hunger. Or fear. Or even sadness. But she felt weight. A heaviness inside her bones, like something was growing in her chest. The collector began appearing more often. Standing by her bed. Touching the back of her neck with long, cold fingers that felt like chalk and bone. And each time, he left behind pieces. Memories that weren't hers. She began to see other winners. People from other states. A man in Kentucky who vanished after cashing a $500,000 ticket. A woman in Idaho who walked into the woods and was never seen again. A teenager in Arizona who won $1.3 million and mailed her tongue to the lottery commission before going silent. Their faces blurred, their voices echoing. It's not about the money. It's about the offering. And once it's accepted, it's never yours again. Then came the door. It appeared in the center of the house, massive, obsidian black, pulsing like a heartbeat. No handle. No lock. Just carved words at the top. Balance must be returned. And beside it, a tiny shelf. Where a single item sat. Eleanor's scratch ticket. Now rotting. Leaking red from its edges like meat. She didn't remember placing it there. But she understood now. The house wasn't a trap. It was a vault. A place where the universe stores its mistakes. Its debts. Its greedy little secrets. And Eleanor? She was no longer herself. She was the interest on a loan she didn't know she took. The body the collector needed to house what had been unleashed. And outside, Millfield was rotting. Have you ever woken up from a dream that felt truer than life? The kind of dream that clings to your ribs even after you're fully awake? The kind that makes the air feel heavy and cold. Like something followed you back? That's what Millfield felt like now. Except it wasn't a dream. And nobody was waking up. A fog had settled over the town. Not a natural one, this fog didn't move with the wind. It held its breath. Blanketed everything in a dull gray veil. Kids stopped going to school. Stores closed early. The birds stopped singing. And every single mirror in town turned black. Not broken. Not dirty. Just black. Like something on the other side didn't want to be seen anymore. One by one, people started vanishing. No sign of struggle. No scent trails for dogs to follow. Just absence. Whole families. Gone in the night. Bed still warm. Coffee still steaming on the kitchen counter. No sound except the ticking of a clock that hadn't been wound in years. They were being called. Or maybe collected. Inside the house, Eleanor began to remember her real name. Not the one her parents gave her. The one they called her. Farinari. Bearer of the weight. Key to the fold. And she realized something else. Something horrifying. She wasn't the first Eleanor Briggs. She had lived before. Many times. In different towns. In different forms. Every century, the collector reached out, and somewhere, always somewhere, she scratched the wrong ticket. Said yes without knowing. Stepped into a bargain that had no beginning and no end. Each time, she returned to the house. Each time, she tried to make it right. And each time, she failed. But this time something was different. She still felt. She still remembered. The house showed her the vault room. A circular chamber, miles wide, buried in the belly of the house. Walls made of flesh and stone, beating with slow pulses. And along those walls were shelves. Thousands of them. And on each shelf, a lottery ticket. Some burned. Some soaked in blood. Some wrapped in skin. Each one linked to a soul who took something that wasn't theirs. And each one humming softly, whimpering, even, like a caged animal dreaming of freedom. The collector stood in the center. Silent. Waiting. He offered her the last shelf. a space carved with her name. But instead of handing over her ticket, Eleanor asked a question. What happens if I refuse? For a moment, the whole house shook. The walls screamed. The air turned black and filled with whispering wind. And the collector raised his hands, not in anger, but in sorrow. Then balance must be taken another way. And behind her, the walls peeled back, revealing Millfield. But not the Millfield she remembered. A hollowed-out version. Children standing frozen in playgrounds. Faces blank. Eyes weeping ink. Their mouths sewn shut with red thread. Adults swaying in grocery aisles, pushing empty carts filled with shadows. People calling out her name, not in anger, but in pleading. Please. Bring it back. We didn't ask for this. You have to pay it. And then she saw him. Caleb. Caleb Torres. A warehouse co-worker. The only person who ever really talked to her. The guy who gave her his gloves when the freezer broke. Who once asked her out for coffee, and didn't take it personally when she said no. He was standing in the middle of the empty town square. Eyes locked on hers. Except, he wasn't alive anymore. His face was pale. Frostbitten. Lips cracked and blue. But he smiled. A sad, knowing smile. Hey, Ellie, he whispered. I think this one's your last round. And he crumbled into snow. That was the breaking point. Eleanor fell to her knees, the ticket shaking in her hand like it wanted to fly away. She finally understood what it was. Not a prize. Not even a curse. It was a key. To the fold. A crack in the world where the old debts live. Where every broken promise, every stolen thing, every soul that took more than they gave, waits. She had two choices. 1. Return the ticket. Pay with her body. Let the collector use her as a vessel to reset the balance. Millfield would survive. But she would not. 2. Keep the ticket. Escape. Wake up somewhere warm, somewhere safe. Let the town fade, be absorbed like the others. Forgotten. And then, something ancient inside her shifted. A third choice. She stood up. Held the ticket over her head and tore it in half. The sound it made was not paper. It was like a scream choked in fire. The house howled. The walls split. The collector lunged, but missed. Because in that moment, Eleanor wasn't hers anymore. She had broken the loop. Not returned the key. Not kept it. But destroyed it. And balance, for the first time in centuries, wasn't restored. It was rewritten. The house collapsed. It didn't fall, it unraveled. Like a memory being erased. 1 second it was there, pulsing and alive, and the next, gone. And Eleanor? She woke up in the snow. In the parking lot of the gas station. Same hoodie. Same cherry Coke. Same dawn sky. Except now, no one remembered her. The news story never aired. Her face was gone from the missing persons report. The ticket? Never existed. The scratch-off game winner fortune was pulled from stores years ago. She walked home. Millfield looked normal again. But quieter. Like something had been removed. No one noticed her on the bus. No one nodded. Not even the landlady. It was like she had been wiped clean. But that's not the end. Because sometimes, late at night, Eleanor walks past a mirror. And sees the collector watching from behind her reflection. Waiting. For the next person to get lucky. For the next deal to be made. For the next soul who thinks they're winning. When really, they're being marked. So next time you buy a scratch ticket, ask yourself, what's the real cost of a miracle? And if you hear whispering before you scratch, put it down. Or don't. Because either way, balance will always be paid. Have you ever looked at something so long that it started looking back at you? This isn't just a ghost story. It's a story of obsession, of confinement, of the line between reality and madness slowly, beautifully, tearing apart. It's a true American haunting, one that went viral on internet forums back in 2009, when a woman named Claire Holloway posted a series of disturbing journal entries online. Most people thought it was a hoax. But those who read through the whole thing, they still swear something deeper was at play. It started with a house. Doesn't it always? Claire was 31, a writer, newly married, and recovering from what she only referred to as a quiet breakdown. Her husband, Mark, was a well-known real estate agent in North Carolina. Wealthy. Proud. Kind of old-fashioned in that trust me I know what's best way. After Claire's breakdown, he took her away from the city and moved her into a vintage Victorian house he bought off-market, a house tucked deep in the woods of a sleepy little town called Belshire, North Carolina. It was called Hollow Pine Lane, A name that already sounded like something out of a Gothic novel. The house sat alone, at the end of the gravel road, surrounded by drooping pine trees and a strange, unsettling quiet. No neighbors for miles. Just birds, wind, and the house. From the outside, it was beautiful, 3 stories, wrap-around porch, gables like castle turrets, and stained-glass windows etched with ivy vines. But inside, something was off. Claire felt it the moment she stepped through the front door. "It smells like rotting flowers," she wrote in her first entry. "Sweet and damp. Like an old corset buried in the mud. Mark doesn't smell it. But it makes my teeth ache." Mark had chosen a room on the top floor for her to write in. "To give you space," he said. "So you can focus, get better, start fresh." It had once been a nursery, but now it was empty except for a wrought iron bed frame and an antique writing desk pushed against the window. The walls were covered in a strange, faded yellow wallpaper, not bright yellow, but a sickly mustard color, mottled with gray patches like mildew stains. The pattern was chaotic, almost dizzying, swirls and vines that didn't seem to connect, like a maze with no exit. Claire hated it. I asked him to tear it down. He laughed. Said it had character. That I should try to see the charm in it. But there's something in the way it moves. Like it's breathing. She began spending hours in that room, staring at the wallpaper, trying to write but always distracted by the twisting, nonsensical lines. She swore it changed during the day, looked different in the morning than it did at night. Sometimes she'd look away for a moment, and when she looked back, the pattern had shifted. At first, it just gave her headaches. But then, things got stranger. She started hearing things, scratching behind the walls, like a fingernail dragging across the plaster. It always came at dusk. Just when the sun sank low enough that the light turned golden and eerie. Mark said it was squirrels in the attic. But Claire wasn't so sure. One night, she wrote, "I swear I saw something moving behind the wallpaper. Just a flicker. A shadow. Like someone crawling along the baseboard." My heart nearly stopped. She tried to laugh it off, told herself it was cabin fever, nerves, her imagination. But every night, the scratching got louder. More frantic. Like something was trapped. And then came the footsteps. Light. Barefoot. Pacing across the ceiling above her room. But there was no attic, just roof. When she told Mark, he kissed her forehead and handed her a sleeping pill. "Just dreams," he said. "You need rest." But she wasn't sleeping anymore. Not really. She would lie awake, staring at the wallpaper, listening to the pacing steps and the whispering sounds that came from the corners of the room. The worst part? She started seeing hands, thin, pale fingers slipping out from between the folds in the wallpaper. Just for a second. Gone before she could scream. By the second week, she was hardly writing. Just watching. Watching the wallpaper, the way it pulsed and moved like something alive. The way the swirls looked more like twisted faces now. Dozens of faces. Mouths open, screaming. One night, she peeled a corner of the wallpaper back. It was like lifting a scab. She expected to find brick or wood underneath. But what she found was more wallpaper. A second layer. A darker, older pattern. But this one was different, drawn in faint charcoal lines, almost like pencil sketches of eyes. Hundreds of eyes. Staring. Watching. "I think someone lived in the wall," she wrote in her journal. Not metaphorically. Literally. "I think she's still there." Mark was growing more distant. He was working late, barely speaking, always brushing off her questions. She thought he was cheating at first. Then she started to wonder if he brought her here on purpose. She found an old trunk in the closet, filled with baby clothes and women's letters, yellowed with age. One of them was from a woman named Eliza Carraway, dated 1893. The letter read, "They won't let me out. I am too wild, they say. But the paper knows me. The paper speaks. It wraps me in its arms when no one else will. And when I am gone, I will crawl the walls and wait for someone who can see." That's when Claire realized. This had happened before. She tried to leave. Packed a bag, waited for Mark to come home, determined to leave that night. But the car keys were gone. Her phone? Dead. The landline? Cut. She was trapped. And that night, the wallpaper opened. She described it like a flower blooming. The seams ripped open, not from age or damage, but like they were being pulled by invisible hands. And what was inside wasn't insulation. It wasn't pipes. It was a hollow crawl space. Just wide enough for someone to move through. On hands and knees. That was the night Claire said she met her, the woman in the walls. She didn't say much about her. Just that she had black eyes, no lips, and a mouth full of yellow teeth that never stopped whispering. And her dress? It was the same pattern as the wallpaper. Claire didn't remember falling asleep. But when she woke up the next morning, her hands were bleeding, and the bedpost was broken in half. Mark was gone. All that was left on his side of the bed was a single strip of yellow wallpaper, curled up like a snake. She who waits in the walls. You ever watch someone lose their mind? Slowly, like ice melting in a glass? Not all at once. Just drip by drip until there's nothing solid left? That's what started happening to Claire. When Mark didn't come back the next morning, she called the sheriff's department from the neighbor's landline, 5 miles down the road. They sent someone out, searched the woods, the surrounding highways, the local hospitals. Nothing. It was like he vanished into the trees. But here's the thing. When the deputy walked Claire back inside the house to talk through everything, she froze in the front hallway. The wallpaper. It had changed. It wasn't just yellow anymore. Not like it used to be. Now it had deep, reddish-brown streaks, thin and jagged, like veins. The patterns had stretched, warped. The faces hidden in the swirls were clearer now. You could almost see their expressions: anguish, rage, desperation. Claire looked at the deputy and said, "Do you see it too?" He tilted his head, squinted. Then he smiled. "I don't see anything," he said. "You should get some sleep." Sleep. That's what they always said. Like sleep fixes things. That night, Claire tried to force herself to rest. She double-locked the bedroom door, stuffed towels under the gap to keep the cold from leaking in. But the room never got warm anymore. It was like something inside the wallpaper was draining the heat from the air. She closed her eyes, counted her breaths. And then she heard it. A voice. Not outside the room. Not in her head either. Inside the wall. "Do you want to see him again?" It whispered. "He's here. He never left." Claire sat up, heart slamming. The wallpaper in front of her, just above the baseboard, bulged outward, like someone was pressing against it from the inside. She scrambled out of bed, grabbed the lamp, and held it close to the wall. The pattern writhed under the light, twisting like it was in pain. And that's when she saw it again. The eyes. Dozens of them. Watching her. Blinking. She ran to the door. Tried to open it. But the knob wouldn't turn. It was as if the lock had melted into the wood. The room had become a cage. She banged on the door. Screamed. No one answered. Because no one was around for miles. Claire backed into the corner, shaking. Then she remembered the crawl space, the one she'd seen behind the wallpaper that night Mark disappeared. She looked toward the bedpost where she'd first pulled the paper back. It was open again. This time, wider. And something was moving inside. She saw pale fingers first. Then a shoulder. And finally, a face, tilted wrong, like a broken doll. The same face from her dreams. Hollow eyes. Mouth stitched with blood. Skin the color of candle wax. "Eliza." Claire couldn't move. The thing crawled out, dragging itself silently across the floor, the folds of its tattered dress trailing like smoke. Claire tried to scream, but she couldn't. Her voice had vanished. Eliza crawled right up to her. And stopped. Inches from her face. And for the first time, Claire heard a clear voice. "He brought you here to replace me." Then she vanished, crawling back into the wall like smoke pulled into a crack. When the sun came up, the room looked normal again. The wallpaper was still yellow. The blood was gone. The crawl space was sealed. Like it never happened. But Claire had changed. That morning, she did something she hadn't done in weeks. She went into town. She needed answers. She walked into the Belshire Historical Society, where they kept old maps and property records. She asked about her house. Hollow Pine Lane. The woman at the desk, an old volunteer named June, froze when she heard the address. "You live in the Caraway house?" she asked, voice dropping. Claire nodded. "You know it?" June leaned in. "That house has a reputation. Been empty for decades. Locals say it's cursed. That anyone who stays too long hears things. Sees things. There's an old story about the original owner's wife, Eliza Caraway. She was locked in the nursery after she lost her baby. Her husband said it was for her safety." "Let me guess," Claire said. "She didn't make it out." June shook her head. "They found her bones in the wall. She'd carved symbols into the wallpaper with her fingernails. Said she'd merged with the house." Claire left before she could ask more. Her hands were shaking too badly. That night, Claire wrote the final entry in her journal. "I don't think I'm alone in here. I think I'm becoming part of it. I find myself tracing the patterns in the wallpaper, over and over. I know they mean something. I just haven't figured it out yet. The handwriting at the end? It wasn't hers. It was jagged. Scrawled. Like it had been carved, not written. She's awake now. When the police returned to the house 2 days later, following a missing persons report from Claire's sister, the place was empty. No sign of Claire. No signs of struggle. But the room at the top of the stairs? It was sealed. The door had no handle. Just smooth wood. As if it had never been a door at all. And inside the room, the wallpaper had changed again. This time, it wasn't yellow. It was white. Covered in black ink. Dozens of words repeated over and over. I am still here. I am still here. I am still here. We all like to believe that when something ends, it's over. But some stories, they linger. They echo. And some homes, especially the old ones, the quiet ones tucked in the woods, they remember. After Claire vanished, Hollow Pine Lane was boarded up by the town. No one claimed the house. Mark Holloway was never found. The police reports were vague, the files accidentally corrupted. No one wanted to talk about what really happened. Except the internet. Claire's journal entries? They were posted online weeks after her disappearance, uploaded anonymously, probably by her sister, who wanted someone, anyone, to believe her. But what she didn't expect was how many people believed her. That's when the story went viral. Thousands of readers flooded forums, Reddit threads, dark blogs. They dissected every entry. Matched the wallpaper patterns to occult symbols. Analyzed every name, every phrase. It wasn't long before someone made the drive to Belshire and broke into the house with a GoPro. He never made it past the nursery. The footage was choppy. Blurry at times. But you could make out the important parts. The way the front door slammed shut behind him. The sudden drop in temperature. The whispering, dozens of voices speaking over each other like overlapping radio channels. And then, the nursery. Still sealed. Still without a doorknob. But somehow, in the video, the door was slightly open. Inside, the wallpaper was peeling in strips. The room looked different now, bigger, like the angles of the walls had changed. Impossible geometry. Like stepping into a dream. There were symbols drawn all over the floor, thin spirals, crescent moons, X's that bled into each other. And in the center of it all, nailed to the floorboards, was an old journal. Claire's. The man filming reached for it. And then. Static. Just 10 seconds of loud, violent static. When the image returned, the camera was sideways. Still recording. But the man was gone. All that remained was a single strip of yellow wallpaper on the lens. Slowly curling. After that, the town put up a gate. Posted signs. Private property. Danger, collapse risk. But it didn't matter. People kept coming. Ghost hunters. Paranormal TikTokers. Curious teens. One girl live-streamed from the backyard. She didn't even go inside. But at 2:13 a.m., the chat exploded. Did anyone else see that? Check the window behind her. Someone's standing there. When they zoomed in on the footage later. In the nursery window, there was a woman's face. Pale. Eyes too wide. Head tilted just slightly, like she was listening. Waiting. And just behind her? The wallpaper. Crawling up the glass like ivy. But here's where it gets even darker. In 2022, a clinical psychologist named Dr. Evelyn Thorne gave a TEDx talk about an old mental illness from the 1800s called domestic hysteria. She mentioned Claire Holloway's story, carefully, without names, and said something chilling. What if the wallpaper was never just a symbol of madness? But an entry point? A psychic membrane thin enough for certain minds to breach? She claimed women with high emotional sensitivity, especially those trapped in domestic isolation, were more vulnerable to something she called the pattern, an ancient, mythological archetype that appears in different cultures throughout time, the Spider-Woman, the Weaver of Fate, the woman in the walls. She's not a ghost, Dr. Thorne said. She's a pattern. A force. She repeats herself, over and over. Through stories. Through time. Through people. 2 weeks after the talk, Dr. Thorne went missing. And guess what they found in her office? A drawing of the yellow wallpaper, pinned to the corkboard, with 3 words scrawled in red ink. I let her in. And this is where you come in. Because people say if you read Claire's full journal from beginning to end in one sitting, if you picture the room, if you imagine the wallpaper and trace the lines with your eyes, you start to feel it too. The pull. The soft whispers. The twitch in the corner of your vision. A strange chill in the back of your neck. And if you have yellow wallpaper anywhere in your home, you should probably take it down. Because the pattern is still growing. And they say the next woman it takes won't just disappear. She'll replace Eliza. That's the horror of it, isn't it? Not just that Claire went missing. Not just that the walls moved, or that something supernatural lurked behind the plaster. The real terror is this. What if madness is just a veil? And what lies behind it? Is something older? Something waiting? The house on Hollow Pine Lane still stands. People claim they've heard screams in the night. Others say they've seen a woman in the upstairs window, her hands pressed to the glass, eyes wide and unblinking. And every now and then, someone finds a strip of yellow paper lying on the ground near the gate. Curled. Wrinkled. Breathing. And scrawled on the back, in cramped handwriting. I am still here. Be careful what you wish for. You ever sit alone at night and think, if I could just change one thing in my life, just one, what would it be? That quiet question. That's where it always begins. This isn't just a creepy old folktale. This story is real. Documented. A modern American tragedy rooted in something much older than all of us. And it starts, like most chilling things do, on an ordinary night. In an ordinary house. With a family who never knew what they were inviting in. October, 2008, Boonville, Kentucky. A small town with more trees than people. The kind of place where everybody waves at stop signs and church potlucks are a serious event. The Winters family had lived there for generations, humble folks. Tight-knit. Just three of them now, Paul, the father, a retired firefighter, Maria, the mother, a middle school librarian, and Ethan, their 17-year-old son with a soft spot for ghost stories and guitar solos. They weren't rich, but they were content. That fall, Ethan had applied to a music college in Nashville. His dream. But money was tight, and the Winters weren't sure how they'd afford it. Then one night, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and turned the sky purple, there was a knock at the door. Paul opened it to find an old man, soaked from head to toe, holding a small wooden box wrapped in a tattered flannel cloth. His name was Mr. Leland, and he claimed to be an old army buddy Paul had pulled from a burning Jeep back in '91. Paul didn't remember him at first, but Leland insisted, said he had nowhere to go and just needed a place to dry off. So they let him in. Maria made him tea. Ethan asked him about war stories. And Mr. Leland. He told them one. About a monkey's paw. He pulled it out of the box with trembling hands. It looked dried and shriveled, like something dug out of the desert. The fur was matted. The fingers twisted like they were frozen mid-scream. Leland said it was cursed. Said it came from India. That it was enchanted by a fakir, a dark spell meant to teach people a lesson. You could ask for 3 wishes, he explained. Any 3 things you want. But the catch? The paw would twist the wish in the worst way possible. It doesn't give, he said. It takes. It finds the thing you care about most and poisons it. Ethan laughed, said it sounded like a horror movie. Leland didn't laugh back. I used 1 wish, he whispered. I wished for money. The next day, my house burned down. My wife didn't make it out. Insurance gave me a settlement. And now. He stared at the paw. Now I live in motel rooms, dragging this thing around to warn others. The family didn't know what to say. They offered him a room for the night. But when they woke up the next morning, Leland was gone. The guest bed was still made. The sheets cold. But the monkey's paw? It was on the kitchen table. At first, they joked about it. Should we wish for $1 million? Ethan teased. Paul rolled his eyes. Let's wish for a new roof first. But as the week wore on, things got heavier. Maria received an unexpected bill, Ethan's college tuition estimate. It was way more than they'd planned. Paul tried calling Leland's motel. No record of him. No forwarding address. No proof he even existed. That night, Paul sat alone at the table. The paw in front of him. A single candle burning beside it. He held it in his hand, dry and stiff like old leather. It felt colder than bone. And then, he whispered. I wish for $50,000. Just enough to help Ethan go to school. The candle flickered. The air thickened. For a moment, it felt like the house breathed. Then, silence. Paul laughed at himself and went to bed. The next morning, the phone rang. It was the sheriff's office. Ethan had been in a car crash on his way to school. A tractor-trailer had skidded on the wet roads, hitting Ethan's sedan head-on. The driver survived. Ethan didn't. Maria screamed. Paul collapsed. The world cracked. The very next day, they received a call from the trucking company's insurance provider. A settlement was being issued for wrongful death. Amount? $50,000. The monkey's paw sat on the kitchen table for days after that. Untouched. Maria didn't eat. Paul didn't sleep. And the town, kind as it was, felt colder. People tiptoed around them. The house got darker, quieter. Like it was holding its breath. Maria was the one who broke the silence. She walked into the kitchen one night, eyes hollow, hair undone, and picked up the paw with both hands. "We get 2 more, she said, her voice hoarse. "We can bring him back." Paul stared at her like she was mad. "You saw what it did," he said. "That thing's evil." But Maria didn't blink. "I don't care." Paul tried to stop her. She gripped the paw tighter, tears running down her cheeks. And she whispered, "I wish for my son to come back to life." The wind outside stopped. The lights flickered once. Then everything went silent. That night, the air inside the house changed. The windows frosted over from the inside. Shadows hung longer on the walls. The sound of old pipes clanking turned into something heavier, like footsteps in the walls. Paul lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He could hear Maria downstairs, still in Ethan's room, still waiting by the window. At exactly 3:07 a.m., the front door creaked open. Heavy steps moved across the floor. And then, knocking. Soft at first. Then louder. Fists pounding the door. Thump. 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 Paul jumped out of bed, hard hammering. Maria was already at the stairs, whispering Ethan's name over and over. But something was wrong. The knocking wasn't desperate. It was angry. Slow. Measured. Thump. 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 Paul ran to the kitchen, grabbed the monkey's paw, shaking. And as Maria's hand reached the doorknob, he shouted, "I wish for everything to go back to before." The paw burned in his hand. The fingers curled into a fist. The lights exploded. And then, nothing. The door was still shut. No one was there. Just silence. The hardest part of grief isn't the tears. It's the silence. It's the way the world keeps spinning like nothing happened. The way everyone says he's in a better place or time heals everything, when in reality, your whole life just collapsed in on itself. And now you're supposed to just move on? After Paul made the third wish, that final desperate cry to go back to before, something changed. But not in the way he expected. At first, it looked like the wish worked. The lights came back. The frost melted from the windows. Maria slumped to the floor, shaking, and the pounding on the door stopped like it had never happened. They sat there for hours, holding each other in the quiet, too afraid to speak. The next morning, the house was normal. Or seemed normal. Ethan's room was back to how it was before the crash. Bed made. Backpack at the foot. The scent of his cologne still hung in the air like a ghost. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A missed text. "Be home after school. Love you." But Ethan wasn't coming home. Not really. They buried an empty casket a week later. Maria didn't cry. Paul didn't speak. The whole town came, murmuring sympathy, but no one asked what had really happened. Maybe they already knew. But at night, things felt wrong. The shadows in the hallway lingered longer. The heat stopped working upstairs, no matter how high Paul turned the thermostat. The mirrors fogged over even when the air was cold. And then came the whispers. Soft. Low. Coming from Ethan's room. At first, Paul thought it was grief. A hallucination. But one night, just past midnight, he got up to use the bathroom and caught something in the mirror. A figure. Behind him. Standing in the hallway. It was the shape of a boy, Ethan's height, Ethan's build. But twisted. Wrong. Shoulders too high. Neck angled like it had been snapped and reset. The reflection flickered like a bad signal. When Paul turned around, no one was there. Just a faint trail of muddy footprints. Leading down the hall. Maria started speaking to the walls. She didn't eat. Didn't sleep. Just wandered the house holding Ethan's old hoodie, whispering, "I know you're here. I know you came back." Paul begged her to stop. "We reversed the wish," he said. "He's gone. That's how it's supposed to be." But Maria's eyes had changed. There was a softness in her that had turned into something sharp. "No," she said. "He's still here. You just can't see him." And maybe she was right. Because one morning, Paul came downstairs to find the monkey's paw back on the kitchen table. He had thrown it out. Burned it in the fireplace. But there it was. Perfectly intact. Sitting next to Ethan's school photo. And underneath it? A single note. Handwritten. Jagged. Barely legible. "You only think it's over." The following nights unraveled fast. The family's clocks stopped working. The power would flicker at 3:07 a.m., same time Ethan's crash had occurred. Paul began to hear voices in the vents, muffled sobs and low growls like a radio tuned to the dead. Then came the scratching. From inside the walls. And sometimes, the attic. One night, Maria vanished. Paul woke to an empty bed and the front door wide open. Rain poured down in sheets. He grabbed a flashlight and searched the property. Nothing. But when he climbed into the attic, an old storage space full of forgotten furniture, he found something horrifying. Ethan's guitar. Cracked in half. Covered in muddy fingerprints. And next to it, in the dust, a message scratched into the floorboards. "You wished me back." Hours passed before Maria came stumbling out of the woods barefoot, her nightgown soaked and torn, her arms covered in scratches. Her eyes were blank. She didn't remember where she'd been. Or so she claimed. Paul tried to take her to a hospital. She refused. Said he would be angry if she left. That Ethan needed her here. That they were being punished for not believing. That night, she locked herself in Ethan's room. Paul started sleeping in the living room, afraid of what might be standing at the top of the stairs at night. He kept the fireplace lit. The monkey's paw sat on the mantel, unmoving. Watching. Then the knocking came again. Thump. 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 But this time, it wasn't at the front door. It was coming from inside the walls. From the bedroom upstairs. Paul rushed up, heart thudding in his chest. Maria was screaming behind the door. He kicked it open, and for a split second, he saw it. Not Ethan. Not anymore. A thing wearing his face. Its skin was ashen, eyes glazed with a film like frost on glass. Mouth open too wide. Joints twisted like a marionette. It lunged toward Maria, whispering, "You promised me forever." Paul grabbed her and pulled her out. Slammed the door. Barricaded it with a chair. The thing scratched at the wood all night. And by morning, it was silent again. They tried to leave. Packed a bag. Took the truck. Made it 3 miles down the road before the engine died. The key snapped in half. Cell service gone. Every road they turned on led them back to the house. The monkey's paw was waiting on the porch when they returned. So Paul did the only thing he could think of. He called a priest. Father Morris was 72. A quiet man. Wore a silver cross and had seen enough darkness to believe anything was possible. He walked the house, silent, touching the walls with the back of his hand. He didn't ask many questions. Just looked Paul in the eyes and said, "This house is no longer yours." They performed a cleansing. Holy water. Prayers. He burned the paw in the fireplace again, this time while reading from a leather-bound book in Latin. Paul watched the thing shrivel in the flames. This time, it screamed. A high, animal wail that shook the walls and cracked the mirrors. The house moaned like something alive. Then, silence. For days. Maria started to improve. Paul slept through the night for the first time in weeks. The fog lifted. Ethan's door stayed shut. And for a moment, they thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. Until the mail arrived. Just one letter. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Of the Winters family. Paul, Maria, and Ethan. But in the photo, Ethan's face was different. Waxy. Pale. His mouth open. And behind him, just barely visible in the shadows, the monkey's paw, reaching for his shoulder. What is grief? If not love with nowhere to go? When we lose someone, we start to wonder, if we had the chance to bring them back. Would we? Even if it cost us everything? That's the question the Winters family could never answer. Not until the house answered it for them. 3 days after receiving that photo, the strange peace that had settled over the house shattered. It began with the smell. Rot. Sour, wet rot, like roadkill baking in the sun. It seeped through the vents, through the floorboards, filling every inch of the house. Paul tore through the basement and attic, searching for the source, but found nothing. Then came the flies. Thousands of them. Swarming the windows, blackening the kitchen ceiling. They buzzed like static, aimless, angry, chaotic. And in the middle of it all, the monkey's paw returned. This time, it wasn't on the porch or kitchen table. It was inside Ethan's casket. Still closed. Still buried. And yet, when the local caretaker did a routine inspection of the cemetery grounds, he found it half opened, just slightly ajar. No one had been there. The dirt above it untouched. Like something had crawled in. Or crawled out. Paul and Maria didn't speak of it. They couldn't. Maria started seeing Ethan again. Not in dreams. Not in memories. In reflections. In the corners of mirrors, in dark windows, in the surface of boiling water. He would appear for a moment, his pale face pressed to the glass, then vanish. He never blinked. Never smiled. He just watched. Maria, fragile and desperate, began spending all her time in Ethan's room. She talked to the walls again. She placed 3 candles on his nightstand, one for each wish, and lit them every night. She began to write in a journal. Paul found it one morning when she'd fallen asleep on the floor. The last page read, "He's cold. I can feel it through the walls. He keeps asking to come in. He said all I have to do is make one more wish." That night, Paul caught her in the backyard. Digging. Barefoot. In the rain. Dirt under her nails. She'd torn up half the lawn with a rusted shovel. "What are you doing?" he shouted. Her eyes were hollow, but her voice was soft. "There's always another wish. The paw doesn't control them. We do." Paul pulled her out of the mud, dragged her back inside. She screamed and fought him, like something else had taken root inside her. And that night, after she finally fell asleep, he burned the journal. But the pages wouldn't catch fire. They curled. They smoked. But they didn't burn. So he buried it. Right beside Ethan's favorite oak tree. But even after that, the dreams didn't stop. Paul started seeing Ethan too. But not as a boy. As a thing. Some nights, Paul would wake up to find the bedroom door cracked open. And standing there, just beyond the hallway light, was a figure. A shape. Tall. Lean. Tilting forward, like its bones didn't fit right under the skin. Its arms were too long. Its fingers. Wrong. And its face. Paul never remembered the face. Only the feeling. Like it knew him. Like it blamed him. Like it was still waiting for something. It all came to a head one final night. Maria was gone. Paul had checked every room, every corner of the property. The only place left to check was Ethan's room. The door was locked. The handle ice cold. He kicked it in. And inside? The candles had melted into a pool of wax across the floor. The monkey's paw, no longer shriveled, was standing upright in the center of the room. Its fingers were fully extended. 5. Paul stared at it. It was never 3 wishes. It never had been. The number didn't matter. It would keep granting. As long as someone was willing to pay the price. The closet door creaked open. Paul turned. And there, standing in the dark, was Ethan. But not as he remembered. This was the twisted, puppet version. The skin was pale and stretched. The lips were sewn with shadow. The voice that came out was deeper. Older. Not human. "You wanted him back. Now you stay with him." Paul tried to run, but the door slammed shut. The air turned to ice. The lights flickered. The last thing Paul saw was the paw, glowing faintly in the dark, and Ethan's twisted shadow reaching for him. 1 year later. The winter's home sits empty. The lawn is overgrown. The windows are boarded up. Locals say the place is cursed. No one knows where Paul or Maria went. Some say they left town. Others say they never left the house at all. The only clue left behind was found by a maintenance worker clearing brush from the backyard. A small wooden box. Wrapped in old flannel. Inside? A mummified monkey's paw. And a folded piece of paper with one line. "Do not open unless you're ready to lose everything." But that's the thing, isn't it? Curiosity is stronger than fear. And somewhere out there, right now, someone's opening that box. Holding that paw. Thinking they're different. Thinking they can control it. But they never do. Because wishes aren't free. And some doors, once opened, never close. What would you wish for? Think hard. Because something is listening. And it always answers.